Remember what you did in the first 10 minutes after waking up this morning. Did you drink something right away? Did you sit up immediately? Did you walk quickly to the kitchen or bathroom? If you have ever had a mini stroke, those 10 minutes could decide your entire future. I'm not saying this to scare you, but to help you start paying attention. Because sometimes the smallest things can determine whether you keep your memory, your voice, and your ability to walk, or lose them. You wake up. No headache. No dizziness. Everything seems normal. You sit up, walk to the kitchen, and drink the usual thing like every day. But maybe your brain isn't ready yet. I am a brain doctor. I have worked with hundreds of patients who have had strokes. But what really shocked me isn't in the scans or complicated surgeries. It's what they keep drinking every morning before 8 o'clock. The thing that seems harmless. The thing they believe is necessary to start a new day. But for someone who has had a mini stroke, it could be the spark that reignites the recently recovered area of the brain. What did you drink this morning? Strong coffee? Cold juice? Or a strong cup of tea on an empty stomach? If you have experienced a transient ischemic attack, a mini stroke, even a small sip before 8 in the morning can overwhelm your brain. I remember a patient of mine named James, 72 years old, who had a mild mini stroke 2 weeks ago. He recovered well, spoke normally, moved fine. And he believed he was completely healthy again. I thought so too. Until the morning of the 14th day. His wife called emergency just before 7. James collapsed right on the porch after finishing a cup of strong coffee. This time it wasn't a mini stroke but a full stroke. The language area was damaged. His left hand no longer moved. His speech was reduced to mumbling. I arrived at the hospital at 7:20 a.m. I saw him lying there. His eyes were still alert. But he couldn't speak. Couldn't call his wife. Couldn't write the words he had drawn all his life. I stood still for a few seconds in the emergency room. I silently asked myself, could it really be that just one cup of coffee early in the morning changed everything? And then I forced myself to accept it. Yes. One small action. One habit that seems normal can make the brain unable to react in time. Why does this happen? Why can just one sip of coffee trigger such a massive stroke? I want to tell you a true story, about a man I once treated and believed he was doing well. And you will see, it's not something unfamiliar that causes danger, but the old habits we think are safe. James was a fairly disciplined man. He had a habit of waking up very early, brewing coffee, then sitting to read the news before breakfast. After a mini-stroke 2 weeks ago, he showed no unusual signs. Walking normally. Speaking clearly. Driving himself to get the newspaper. He even joked with his grandson with the same witty remarks as before. Everyone in his family thought he was fine. And he himself was sure he was just as he used to be. Only I had some lingering doubts. I advised him to adjust his morning routine. Don't drink coffee before eating. Don't do anything strenuous before 8 o'clock. He smiled lightly, nodded, then said, "Doctor, don't worry, I know how to take care of myself now." That morning, just as I entered the hospital, I got a call from his wife. Her voice was shaky, her words broken. "He has fallen, right outside the door, can't speak." When I arrived, James was lying on the stretcher. His face slightly crooked. His lips moving but no clear sound. His left hand hanging limp. His heartbeat was fast but blood pressure had dropped. His wife cried softly, whispering, "He just finished his coffee, like always." I said nothing. Just stood still for a few seconds and looked into James's eyes. His eyes were still awake. But inside was a locked man. CT scan showed damage in the left hemisphere, where language is controlled. This stroke was worse than the previous one. And what broke my heart was that it came from something so familiar. A habit that seemed harmless. A cup of coffee. Drinking on an empty stomach. Drinking before the brain had time to regulate after a long night. Drinking because he thought he was still the same. Perhaps what troubled me most was not the second stroke, but his wife's eyes. She didn't blame anyone. She just held his hand, gently rubbed it as if fearing he was cold. Those eyes were full of bewilderment. As if asking, "Doctor, just because of coffee so early?" And I asked myself the same question. Could just one sip of coffee really extinguish part of memory, speech, and a smile? I have no excuse. Because it is true. One sip of coffee, taken at the wrong time, on a brain already damaged, can be the final spark. James is still alive. But he lost his voice. He no longer reads the newspaper every morning. No longer tells funny stories to his grandson. He still sits on the porch, but silently. And his wife still makes coffee, but places it on the table then stares into space. After everything that happened to James, I wonder, what exactly in that cup of coffee is so dangerous? And to answer that, we need to understand a bit more about how the brain works after a mini-stroke. Many people who have experienced a transient ischemic attack, or mini-stroke, often think they have gotten past the worst. And indeed, in many cases, they recover very quickly. But there is one thing few realize. The brain after a mini stroke is not fully healed. It's like a windshield cracked by a small stone. From afar, it still looks clear and intact. But just a slight shake or sudden change in temperature can cause the whole pane to shatter. The human body after a night's sleep is the same. The heart beats slower. Blood pressure dips slightly. Blood vessels constrict. The brain is not yet ready to handle strong impacts. When you just open your eyes, the brain needs a few more minutes to adjust blood pressure, heart rate, and distribute blood evenly throughout the body. If at that time you drink a beverage high in caffeine, cold temperature, or strong acidity like coffee, cold juice, or concentrated lemon water, those substances will make your heart beat faster. Your blood vessels constrict harder, and blood flow to the brain changes suddenly. For a brain with old cracks, that change could be the last straw. Many of my patients say they have drunk coffee every morning their whole lives. And I believe that. But the problem is that after a mini stroke, the brain is no longer the same. One sip of coffee at 6 in the morning today might be fine. But tomorrow morning, when your blood pressure fluctuates more, when you sleep less, or when the weather turns cold, that very sip of coffee could become the trigger that causes a small blood vessel in the brain to burst. We cannot see the fragile vessels in the brain. We also cannot accurately sense the moments when the brain is unstable. But we can do something simpler. Slow down. Adjust morning habits. Replace the cup of coffee with a few sips of warm water. Eat a small bite before drinking any stimulant. Let the brain wake up gently. No sudden jolts. No forcing. No surprises. I used to think there had to be a medicine to protect the brain after a TIA. But gradually I realized the most important thing is not to take more medicine, but to avoid unnecessary risks to the brain. A sip of a drink at the wrong time can be more dangerous than a forgotten pill. Because it happens too fast. And because we don't think it can cause harm. When you understand the mechanism behind a habit that seems harmless, the next important thing is not to worry, but to start gently somewhere to help the brain recover without further threats. I will share a few small things many elderly patients have done. Thanks to that, they keep their memory, keep walking, and keep a full life. If you're still listening to me now, I know you truly want to change. Thank you for staying. And now, let's start with small steps to protect the brain, shall we? No need to change too much. Just change the right things. Like a windshield with a small crack, what you need is not to tape it up but to avoid shaking. Avoid sudden changes at the weakest moments. I still vividly remember the first time I used the cracked windshield image to explain to an elderly patient. She smiled softly, then said to me, "So I have to drive really slowly so the glass doesn't break more, right, doctor?" I nodded and said, "Not just driving slowly, but also avoiding potholes. Every morning, if we start with a smooth, gentle, slow enough habit, we are helping our brain avoid sudden jolts like potholes on the road." So how to start? I won't list it like a manual. I just want to share what I've seen work best from dozens of my elderly patients. First, when you just wake up, don't rush to sit up right away. Lie still for 1 to 2 more minutes. Breathe in deeply, breathe out gently. As if you're talking to your body after a long sleep. The brain is still slow then. The vascular system hasn't pumped evenly yet. Just lying down for a minute more will significantly reduce the risk of low blood pressure when standing up. Next, drink a few sips of warm water. Not cold. Not sweet. Not too much. Warm water helps thin the blood after a long night. Helps blood flow more smoothly. Helps the heart beat more steadily. Many people think coffee helps wake them up. But what I want is alertness and calmness, not alertness with vascular spasms. After drinking water, don't rush. Sit on the edge of the bed, stretch your shoulders gently 3 times. Move your neck. Rotate your wrists. Gently shake your knees. Like checking your car's windshield before starting the engine. If you feel no dizziness, no blurred vision, no forehead tension, then you can start the new day. Next, eat a little something. A slice of bread. Half a banana. A plain cracker. Anything that helps the body have a foundation to metabolize. After a mini stroke, an empty stomach combined with stimulants is a duo that easily harms brain blood vessels. Just a light cushion from food, and the chemical reaction changes a lot. And finally, if you still want to drink coffee or strong tea, please wait until after 8:30 in the morning. That's when the nervous system is stable. Blood vessels have dilated. The brain has received enough even blood flow. A cup of coffee at 8:45 a.m. is much safer than a sip at 6:15 a.m. Don't think you're just waiting to drink coffee. Think you're waiting for the windshield to stabilize after a cold night. One of my patients, named Walter, has been doing just that for 2 years now. He taped a small note next to his morning coffee cup, with just one line written on it: "My brain wakes up slower than I do." And since putting up that note, he has never had to return to the hospital for any brain vascular issues. And then, when these seemingly small habits are repeated regularly, morning by morning, a miracle happens. Not by the sound of an emergency alarm, but by footsteps still steady. I want to tell you about someone like that. Walter is one of the patients I remember most. 70 years old, he had a mini stroke while shopping with his wife. He recovered well. No weakness in limbs. No speech disorders. He recovered well. No weakness in limbs. No speech disorders. But afterward, his eyes always held something I couldn't quite name. At his first follow-up, he said to me, "Doctor, I'm not afraid of dying. But I'm afraid of living without being myself." That sentence left me silent for a long time. Because I understood he wasn't afraid of the end. He was afraid of losing his memory. Afraid of not being able to call his grandson's name. Afraid of not being alert enough to see his wife each morning and realize he was still home. From that sentence, I started to see him differently. Not just as a patient, but as someone wanting to preserve every remaining piece of life through the simplest things. And that changed how he lived each morning. Walter doesn't drink coffee before 8 o'clock. Doesn't drink cold water on an empty stomach. Doesn't jump out of bed even when it's fully light. He puts a reminder note on the table next to his chair. It says one sentence, "No rush, I am still alive." That sentence isn't for him to read, but to remind him to feel each step. Each sip of water. Each stretch. As if every morning is a departure, not a race. And then the miracle happens, not a big change, but the gentle consistency that has preserved for him more than he expected. 2 years later, he returned for a checkup. I saw he still walked straight, spoke clearly, smiled brightly. He said, "I still drink coffee." But drinks it as a way to enjoy, no longer as a habit. He said some days he forgets coffee, but never forgets to drink warm water. Some mornings he wakes up late but still never skips the step of breathing a few minutes in bed. "Doctor," he said, "what I've kept is not just my steps or memory, but the feeling of being myself, whole, every day." Sitting before him, I saw clearly something that no textbook teaches. Healing doesn't always come from medicine or machines, but from the gentle proactivity of the patient, every day, bit by bit. People often say after a health crisis, the most precious thing is time to live. But for those who've faced stroke risk, time to live isn't enough. They need wholeness. To keep their voice. To keep their memory. To keep their steps, their gaze, and their connection to the world around them. And that doesn't come from medicine. Doesn't come from machines. But from how they step into the morning. Gently. Listening to their body. Knowing when to pause. I tell this story not only to show you that protecting your brain is possible, but also to help you believe it starts with the smallest things you do tomorrow morning. If you've ever had a mini stroke, or if your loved one has fallen once and gotten up again, please don't take your mornings lightly. It's not just the start of the day. It's where your brain is protected. It's when you choose between continuing to live fully or living with anxiety and loss. No one asked you to change everything. But if you start with one thing, and stick with it, you will see that change preserves something within yourself. You don't need to change everything. Just start with one small thing. Like Walter did. A reminder note. A sip of warm water. A minute of lying still after waking. Because you don't survive a mini stroke just to live in fear. You survive it to continue living a life worth living. To tell your own story. And maybe, to help someone else avoid what you went through. If you do this, you don't just keep your memory for yourself. You may also become the first in your family brave enough to change, passing down good habits to the next generation. Sometimes just one person doing it right can make the whole family rethink. If you find what I shared today helpful, please leave a comment below. No need to write much. Just be honest. Maybe someone reading that will start a new morning differently. Safer. More careful. More humane. And if you want to continue this journey with me, where we learn to live calmer, clearer, and steadier every day, please subscribe to this channel. So every week, I can sit here and share a small story with you. Small, but capable of preserving a whole life.